So in my experience of life, I've had there's been a few things that really what did they do? Altered the course, let's say. The one has been music, the influence of music in my life. And then after 25 years in that world, from working clubs and stuff, it just got a little messy. So then I ended up in addiction recovery. I got interested in Buddhism first, different types of Buddhism, and just kind of reading around what was going on. After that, I moved into yoga a little bit, or a lot, into the dualistic side of yoga, yeah. So I'm just going to give you a little background, so this kind of maybe makes a little bit more sense of this character, this experience at least. I started studying yoga, and it moved into a lot of dualistic studying, like Shiva Shakti kind of stuff. And it was useful, but when I first started recovery, I was reading non-dual Buddhism, so mostly like Chan Buddhism or Zen, old Zen Buddhist stuff. And it was really hitting because in recovery, essentially in the 12 steps, they present an issue being self-reliance. And that word self, like a small s self, is what has misled us, essentially. And it was definitely what was misleading me. So there was something driving this ship that was misleading this ship a lot and making things very uncomfortable. And that was driving me to drink a lot, to get out of depression or whatever. So I moved into some teachers who were teaching dualistic stuff, which was interesting. But it actually caused some trouble for me in a way because, hey everybody, I can see some pictures popping up. I was just saying earlier, this platform's a little bit weird to give talks because I can't see you or hear you talk, but you can write in the chat and I can see some pictures if people have them up. Anyways, what was I saying? These dualistic stuff, and it started to confuse things a little bit for me. Hey, Sandy. Because in 12-step recovery, there's a problem, essentially. And that problem would be considered self-reliance. They would even go in some of the texts, like the 12 and 12, to say the 12... what do they say in the 12 and 12? Self-confidence, when it comes to drinking, essentially, would avail you nothing. It was a liability, even, they say in the 12 and 12 in recovery. So I was growing up in a way in recovery under that idea. There was a big focus on this thing called self, small s self, and how it was misguiding me. Yeah. So that was kind of as far as it had gotten. That all made sense to me because I was in the rough real bad and something was misguiding me. So AA was essentially saying that what's misguiding you is your thinking, your thought system. Yeah. Which was revelatory because I thought the thought system was the GPS. Yeah. I mean, the thought system is the GPS if I'm taking it to be myself, for sure. So, anyways, I ended up coming back to non-duality, the message of non-duality. And it clears up a lot of things for me. Because it in a way rights the ship of a lot of misunderstandings which were in control of my life for a long time. So the philosophy of not to, or the message of not to, would be that this experience is dualistic. Yes? So there's a seeming object which is looking at a seeming subject which is looking at objects. Now that subject has a sense of individuality, as Ramana Maharshi would say. That would be considered in non-duality as a false subject, that sense of individuality. So if you know of Ramana Maharshi, or if you don't, it doesn't matter. But there's a sense of individuality which we call I, or me. Yeah? And that comes before everything else. That sense of individuality. So they're my thoughts. They're my emotions. They're my things. They're my headphones, my microphone. Yeah. The my comes first. Now, oftentimes, well, let's say most times, it's presupposed in everybody's head that my is the subject of what's going on, of all these objects. Yeah. Now that my is heavily influenced by everything that's happened to it. It's like the Course in Miracles say you can only see the past. Yes? So the head is essentially looking... No, that's not right. The my is looking out through the head in a way. And we're taking ourselves to be that my. Non-duality is negating that. Yes? It's saying not to. So the I that J is taking itself to be would be considered the subject of all these objects, like all these little images popping up here below. Yeah. That subject is taking itself to be the ultimate center, and it ain't. This would be the misunderstanding that not to philosophy points out. Not to, yes? So if there's a subject-object, I'm neither of those. So it said in the description, I think we were going to look at a reading. So rather than just going on and on, maybe I'll bring up... There's one thing from a Chinese, old Chinese Buddhist teacher named Huang Po. And the reading, it's very short. It would say, what is being perceived is not what is perceiving. What is being perceived is not what is perceiving. So if you look at your experience... What is being perceived is not what is perceiving, yes? So non-duality or not to, the message, in my experience, it's a negation. It's not an affirmation of something, like I am this thing, yeah? It's a negation of what you're not, or what is being perceived, if we're looking at this quote, sorry. So what is being perceived is not what is perceiving. So obviously I can perceive with the senses, the room that I'm in, the microphone, the headphones, the looper thing. I can perceive the images. I can perceive all these things, yes? So that is obviously not what is perceiving. Yeah? Then I can perceive the senses. I can perceive the ears, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the sense of sensation. So that's obviously also not what is perceiving. Now these would be objects to what is considered me or I. Now this is the thing. You can perceive the movement, let's say the thought of I or my. So if we look at what Huang Po says, what is being perceived cannot be what is perceiving. If you can perceive that movement of I, then that movement I, the thought I, is not what is perceiving. You see? Now why is this important? Because everything comes after that I. Yes? So all of my depressive thoughts come after the sense of I. So the message of not to is not really looking at what's arising. It's looking at who it's arising to. Yes? So what is being perceived is not what is perceiving. So whatever is being perceived can essentially be negated. Now that can often be approached as people getting really angry or trying to destroy things that are being perceived. This, in my experience, is a mismovement. It's not negation. We're not saying something isn't arising in your experience. Like thoughts are arising, emotions are arising, ideas are arising, sounds are happening. This is all happening in the experience, yes? All the negation is doing is saying that is not my truest nature, let's say. That's not consciousness. So then often people will say, well, I am conscious, yes? But the I am can be perceived. So if you were to look at that, what is being perceived cannot be what is perceiving, yes? Then to say I am is perceived. So that's not what is perceiving either. You see, the idea of you or the idea of J can be perceived. So it's not what is perceiving. So the subject of all the other objects is playing itself as a subject. J is the subject of everything else, of all these objects, let's say. Yes? This would be considered the misunderstanding of the logic of non-duality. J is not the ultimate subject. That movement, that identification of J as the subject, looking at all these objects, would be the misidentification which is causing suffering. You see, not two. This is it. So there's a subject, there's something playing a subject there, but it's not subjectivity. Because it can be perceived. You understand? You see, now this offers, and 12-step recovery offers a new solution. And it's not that what is being perceived, like the thinking, is going to be altered, or it's going to be magically purified to a point. Good, Sandy. You're a bit confused. I'll come back to that in just a second. Yeah. The head is confused, but what you are is not confused. I forget what I was going to say there a minute ago. But the beauty in this message here, this is the thing. If the sense of I or the sense of individuality can be perceived, it is not what is perceiving. So when a thought arises, if I inquire, like for Ramana Maharshi's self-inquiry, who does that arise to? The first answer that comes is I or me. Now that I or me can be perceived. Yes? So that is not what is perceiving. Now that's a big... there's a lot of bells that go off on that one for me. Yes? Because now if I have a bunch of depressing thoughts that usually cause me to drink, the logic of non-duality is not so much that we're going to change and alter those thoughts and work super hard to change those thoughts. Yes? So that was how I used to approach a lot of stuff. I was going to use spiritual practice to change this body and these thoughts into perfect thoughts. It didn't work. Yeah. And non-duality or not two highlights why it doesn't work. Because I'm not the one that the thoughts are arising to, which is the real kicker. If you want your thoughts to slow down, it's not to try to stop thoughts. It's to see that you're not the thinker of those thoughts. Yeah. So, I see the questions and they're great. I'll come back to them in a minute. I'm just going to keep rolling here for a second. Because, So that the beauty of non-duality then it highlights a lot of misunderstandings that I lived under for a long time. When a depressive thought came up, I thought that thought was my thought. Yeah? So let's say the thought comes up that I'm worthless, something happens, and the thought comes up that I'm worthless. Now that thought, I thought I was going to get rid of that thought. I thought I was going to purify or make my head not think that thought. And that didn't work. That hasn't worked for me so much. But then to investigate who does that thought arise to, the immediate answer I comes up. And then what happens? I can be perceived, so it's not what is perceiving, which means I, am misidentified with that I. And when the head says I, what's it saying I? It's saying I, the body, yeah? So non-duality is essentially you're not the body, would be the primary, you're not the body. Yeah. All the problems that we have are the body's problems, essentially. So when a depressive thought comes up, if I'm not the I that thought arises to, that breaks open a huge option for me. That I don't have to listen when the head presents the idea that I'm worthless. Yes? Whoa. Not only do I not have to listen, but I can see that I'm not the one that thought arises to. The thought arises for sure. I'm not saying that's not happening. There's an appearance of a thought that's going on. But the real inquiry is into who does that thought arise to. Because if it arises to a sense of I, and I'm not that I would surely like to know that. Yes, because if I'm taking that thought to be my thought, then that thought is going to drive me to do a bunch of stuff. And in my case, it would be to drink. If you're not a drinker, you could do a lot of other things, yes? So I'm just going to read the questions on here, if there are questions or whatever. We are the one witnessing the thoughts. All right. So when I read that, we are the one witnessing the thoughts, I'll talk about this subject-object, because the two-ness of your experience comes up in the head. There's a thought that happens, yes? Let's call that thought the object, because what pops up right after that thought is the idea that you're the one seeing the thought. Yes, Melissa? So if you can write in the chat, then I can know if you're hearing this or not. Yeah. So there's a thought, and then you're the one seeing the thought. That would present a two-ness, yes? This idea would be negating that two-ness. So you're not the thought, and you're not the one who the thought arises to. This is the thing that why this has affected me so much as a body, yeah? This not to message is not for the body. It's to be free. It's not for self. It's to be free from self, which is the movement of 12 steps as well. Yes? It's seeing that self is essentially the problem. What we're identified as would be the obstacle. Yeah? So when there's a thought, and then there's a sense that I'm the one seeing the thought, that sense binds a lot of people, because then whatever comes up in the thoughts, it doesn't seem like we're getting free from it, because I'm always the one seeing it, meaning that it's my thought. Yeah. So thought, and then I'm the one seeing the thought. Yes, would present you with a duality. Not two is the message. Negate. So when this presents itself, you don't grab it. When this presents itself, you don't grab it. You understand? I see what you're saying. Okay, good. Yes? A lot of people get stuck on this second part, and they don't seemingly get free from bondage. Yes? So that's a very important thing to see, because it happens a lot when I talk to people, especially in recovery, yes? So they're sober, they're not drinking, but the manifestations of self, which primarily would be through the thought system, yes, self presents itself to you as thoughts. Your head is talking to you as you, and non-duality is saying it's not you, essentially. It's not arising to a you. Okay, so that's important to see. Thought, and then what is seeing the thought is also not you, because now you're stuck in a duality. That duality, Melissa, of the thought and then being the thinker or the seer of the thought can be a tough circle to get out of. That's why negation is very important, I feel, because you negate this and you negate this. You don't try to change this first thought with this second thought. Yeah, because being the one, a thought comes up, I'm the seer of the thought. That's another thought. You see? It's just one thought. It's like two sides of one coin. Yes? But if there's a thought and you're seeing the thought, then that would present you as two different things, and that doesn't even make sense. You understand? So you have to negate the thought, which is that's pretty obvious to see. We all can see that we see our thoughts. It's just that most people are sitting and being the seer of the thought. In Advaita, they talk about Atman and Brahman, but what has been a little bit clearer to me, to be honest, is the philosophy or the idea of no self that comes through Buddhism. That idea of no self has been very, it's just clearer. I don't know why. It just seems to land more. Because then I'm not trying to land somewhere. See, if I'm trying to get to what I am, it's like there's a quote by Ramana Maharshi that says, being ourselves reality. If he's right, which I'm going to say he's probably right. He's like the greatest sage of our lifetime or whatever. Or before my lifetime anyways. Being ourselves reality means you are what you're looking for. Yes? So that would put into question a lot of the looking. Meaning, what the hell is looking? Because if I am what I'm looking for, then all of this mental gymnastics that's going on that's looking for freedom, that would suggest that I'm not that, yeah? Now, if I'm trying to take an affirmative approach towards, I'm going to get myself free, that would be what I'm not trying to look for what I already am. The head is taking, let's say, awareness or your nature or whatever. It's taking that and then trying to find what you are already, yeah? Negation for me has been pointed a lot better for me. When something pops up that says I have to get free, it gets negated. It doesn't get listened to and followed. You see? Because you see that it's not arising to you. This is a key point. Otherwise, we spend our lives trying to chase freedom. When, as Ramana was saying, you already are freedom, yes? So what's blinding us from being free is listening to the chasing and going on the chase with it, yeah? I'd much rather see that I'm not what's seeing the thought, yeah? And then I can let go of the two of them and then see where you land after that. You understand? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Kate, physical pain. Physical pain. Physical pain. Physical pain. Physical pain would happen in the body, yeah? So it would be worth to inquire into who that physical pain arises to first. Will that get rid of the physical pain? No. But I thankfully haven't had too much physical pain in my life this far, especially like chronic stuff. So it's hard for me to kind of touch on that. But physical pain would be a after thing. So it's very important, I feel. I could talk about psychological pain, and maybe that will resonate with you, Kate. Because I know that one's potent. Yeah. So when it comes to psychological pain, when there's a rising of psychological ideas that are causing a lot of pain, I've tried to stop those ideas, and that caused them to get a lot worse. I'll say that. The reason it caused my psychological pain to get a lot worse. With physical pain, it's worth inquiring who it's arising to, because a lot of the psychological SHIT that I've experienced was super inflamed by my ownership of it. I thought depressive thoughts were my thoughts. Yeah. And when you see that you're not the owner or the thinker of those thoughts, there's a big release there, because there's a lot of meaning given to things if we own them. This also comes from A Course in Miracles, but you give everything all the meaning that it has. Meaning your head is giving all the meaning to everything that it has. Yeah, so everything that's being given meaning is given it from the head, would be including physical pain. So I don't know if that helps, but inquiring into who that physical pain arising to can give a big release, because if it's your physical pain, if you are the body, then the physical pain is stamped with ownership. But if that's not true, which this message would point to, that you're not the body, that changes the relationship with physical pain. I don't know if it will lessen or what, but it changes the relationship to it. I know that. And there's a big relief from that, because we end up carrying a lot of meaning with the body. What happens to the body essentially happens to me. That is a ton of meaning. If I'm identified as something, that's like the most meaning I can give it. Yeah. To inquire more subtly, maybe inside the body, into who it's arising to, I found very beneficial, at least with psychological. So I don't know, maybe I hope that helps a bit, you know. But when we resist things because they're happening to us, they seem to get worse. And yeah, that's my experience. When I'm pushing things away, even when the senses, like our sense of the body gets very fragmented and divided because of our ownership of it and the things that have happened through our lives. I know that through doing embodiment therapy with people. But, you know, when we're pushing away from things, they get a lot worse. Like the head lights them on fire. You're not doing any of this. This is like the mental movement, yeah? The mental movement is claiming everything that's happening, and it's saying it's happening to you, essentially. And this message is just looking at that you to see what the hell that is. Is there a thing inside the body that is you? Can you give me you? You can't give me you. Yeah, so that would bring into question, then what am I? Yeah, who am I, like Ramana would say? Who am I? Yeah, because once it comes down to the I, who's physical pain arising to? Me. Well, what is that me? Okay, so this message would say it's not the mind and it's not the body. So that would already negate like, 90% of the contents. Yeah. So when something arises, which would be a thought, that would get negated, meaning you wouldn't grab onto it. Yeah. I don't know if that helps, Kate, but I hope. Maybe a little bit, yeah. I just know that when I'm identified as something that's getting harmed, it gets way more messy. And the psychological pain, at least, increases a lot. Mm-hmm. I have thoughts that seem to rise from tension spots in the body. Yeah, Sandy. Alan Watts, I think, says something like, being your individual self causes all kinds of neurophysical tensions or something like that. But yeah, I have thoughts that seem to rise from tension in the body. The body in the Advaita outlook would be non-existent, meaning that it doesn't have individual existence. So look at that question again. I would more so say that tensions arise from thoughts. Yeah. Because the brain transmits to the body of which it's a part. Yeah. Without the brain, the body is just whatever. The thing would just fall over, let's say, But there's definitely psychological tension that gets held in the body, obviously. And from just doing embodiment therapy with people, I've seen that a lot. I mean, that's pretty much mostly what we work with, yes? But when it comes to the message of not two, all of that comes after the identification as the body. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong, obviously. I feel like having an understanding of why tension is in the body and what psychologically that means I feel that's important to see that it's not you, that you're not doing the thinking that's happening. I'll give you an example of this. For a long time, I had a big tension in the bridge of my nose. And when that would let go through like embodiment and settling downward and stuff, just through basic Chan, mostly this thing called soft butter from Yasankana by Hakuin. When that would let go, I noticed that this tension came from a psychological movement of really wanting to get stuff. I'm not supposed to swear on Insight Timer. I swear too much anyways. But I was trying to get a lot, including this message, yeah? So like I would get tense here. And I noticed that there's a psychological connection to the physical body. But it was psychological first. Yes? So, why did I want to get free so bad? Because I was seemingly in a lot of... my body and mind were in a lot of discomfort, yeah? So there's a pattern of me trying to get out of that discomfort. Why is that? Because of stuff that happened to me when I was a young kid. Yes. So now that pattern of trying to I need to work really hard and get out of pain. I need to get out. I got to move. I got to push. I got to get this message. I got to get what I already am, which is a hilarious idea. That is a habit pattern, yeah, of the mind. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that habit pattern. Yeah. Which brings up a big idea especially Advaitic. They talk about it in Advaita Vedanta a lot, about doership. Am I doing the mind, or am I being done by the mind? That would be a big question, yeah? Are these thoughts happening, or am I doing these thoughts? Because I would argue a lot that these thoughts are happening before I'm not doing these thoughts. They're happening as habit patterns. Just like that need to grab onto this message or to get out of discomfort or move this way. I got to get out. That's a habit pattern of my head. I'm not doing that. But I can only see that from the understanding of the tension in the body. Yeah? When I go and look at that tension and then release it, I see why it's there. That gives a big clue, no? There's a knowledge. There's an inquiry into why that tension is there. It's there because I want to get out of something. Why do I want to get out of something? Because I'm uncomfortable. Why am I uncomfortable? Well, I've been uncomfortable my whole life. Why? Because of this, yes? So, of course, my head wants to get out of discomfort. So am I doing the tension and those movements? No, it's a habit pattern of trying to get out of discomfort. Because right now I'm sitting on a chair and there's no problem. Yeah. Thoughts is just an ego, which is just a habitual action. Pre-programmed in the brain, therefore it is not thought is an object. And the program in the brain created. The thought is the subject. This is how I understand thought. Chi. Pain is a signal to the physical body that something's not right. The pain is the survival. We should take care of pain, not to ignore it. Yeah. Thought is just an ego, which is a habitual action. Yeah. I don't usually use the word ego because this message for me points to what the ego is arising to. In my experience, getting really infatuated with what's arising is not has served me not well because I get entrenched in it. I'm just interested in who it's arising to. But I know what you mean by the pre-programming of the brain. I see that. Therefore, it's not the primary soul thought is an object and the program in the brain created the thought as the subject. I don't so much understand that. The only thing I could say, Chi, is that the thought being a habitual action is like an arising, is just how I would see it. But I would definitely say the thinking is programmed by what's happened in life or before. Like Ramesh Balsekar talks about in his book, Who Cares About That, a lot, which is a really great, I love that book. The thing is, I'm more interested in who it's arising to. Because we get infatuated with the ego, and then I've found in my own experience that there's a habit then to want to change the ego, but it doesn't really change habitually. I mean, the head changes in habit patterns and things, but the baseline of the duality, it's got a low ceiling in my experience. Yeah, I'm pretty stupid for the most part. So when I stop trying to make this system into some kind of super system, I just see it doesn't arise to me. Yeah, and then I'm not so worried about what I guess what would be called the ego. I don't know. I don't use the ego term because it's who the ego arises to. This is the whole point of the not to philosophy. Yeah, it's not to improve the self, the individuality. That would maybe take another way. I feel like seeing the individuality and why certain thoughts, or like we were saying, tensions in the body arise is important. But the real key is to see that it's not arising to you. Yeah? That the idea or the sense of individuality, and there is a sense of individuality, yes? It's non-existent just means that it's not inherently individual. It's not separate than everything else. Yeah, because there's this real sense in the body that there's this body and then there's everything else. And that creates a ton of tension. That tension gets reified or fragmented even more by our self-centeredness, which is like we would talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous. Self-centeredness being the issue. The mind, the thinking, is inherently self-centered. It's really only thinking about its own position in this way, yeah? It's not you or mine, it's everybody's mind. That's how the mind works, yeah? So it's got a low ceiling. I don't see the head becoming not self-centered. It's a self-centered system. That's how it operates, yeah? So I'm not interested in making the head not self-centered. I'm just looking, or this message, not even me, but this message is just looking at who's it's arising to. Because I always thought it was arising to me. And that ain't the case. Yeah, because me is also arising to what? This is the investigation, yes? To the ground, let's say. That it's like space, awareness, whatever we want to call it. Yeah, the ground of healing, the ground of being, the what's Longchem Rabjam call it, the space of phenomena or whatever. There's a bunch of things arising. One of those things we might call an ego. That's all fine, but who it's arising to is the focus. Because the who is what is the bind. That is the bondage of self in addiction. And if I am bound to the idea that what's arising is arising to me, then I'm bound to what's arising. And in my experience, what's arising is not peachy. Yeah? It's just soaked in subject, object, me and other, and the head's focus is on the me. Me. And that me gets super uncomfortable. And then I want to drink, or I want to drug, or I want to do whatever I'm going to do, yeah? Or I'm going to get addicted to spiritual practice, and I'm going to change what's arising, which is another thing I got addicted to. I'm going to change the head. I'm going to alter the ego and make it into a great ego. That also did not work, yeah? But it was another form of addiction for sure. This is why I think this message is so beautiful, because it just goes right to the root. It just goes right to the ground level of it. And for me, that's super, there's a lot of space in there. It gives this individual experience space to breathe, not by changing it, but by seeing that there's space there, I guess. I don't know how else I would say that. I don't have the words to just push that out, but it's hard to touch a wordless thing with words, but like this is what we're here for, yeah? This is, I guess, these are the tools we have. Music's another good way, though. I'll start that, I guess, in 20 minutes, 15 minutes, but yeah. That's nice, and it's good to have, if there's any other questions or something, please ask. Yeah? So the Hong Po thing is that what's being perceived is not what is perceiving. If you take that internal, inside the body, there's thoughts arising and there's emotions arising, and they're all being perceived. So that little quote would say that what is being perceived is not what is perceiving. Yes? Now, there's a feeling that there's I am perceiving all of this. But that I, that movement, that can be perceived, yeah? Now, as far as Ramana Maharshi is concerned, the teachings of Ramana, he would say not to leave that I. Don't even budge from that sense of I. because that everything comes after that I. Yeah, the ego or the emotions, the thoughts, the ideas, all of it comes after that I. Yeah. There's I, and then there's the world, essentially. So he would say, if you're not that I, don't leave the I. Yeah, the sense of I or me. Is keep the investigation there. Because if that is not a thing that's arising, that would give you a lot of space from everything that comes after the I. And in my experience, a lot of the interest and obsession with spirituality just kind of falls off in a way. Because the head can keep obsessing about getting liberated, but if you see that that head is arising to not you, then the ownership of it gets diminished quite a lot. And in that diminishing, you just care less, I feel. You don't care less, but it's that feeling of like caring less. So what is being perceived is not what is perceiving, is a real pointer, I feel, from Huang Po, in what is being perceived. If it can be perceived, then it's not ultimately what's perceiving. And there's a lot of space in that. Because being that I, misidentified as the body, as just the body, we should say probably, because there is a body and there's all these things arising, is a very claustrophobic place to live. And there's a lot of urge to get out of that. But what wants to get out of that claustrophobia of the body is perceived. It's not what is perceiving. So as soon as we start to go with the head, when the head says, okay, I got to go do this, and I got to read this, and I got to do this and this and this, if we start to go with that, then we are taking what is being perceived as what is perceiving. And that would be the great misidentification of not two philosophy. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Cool. Does anybody else have any questions or something before we wrap? You can always write too on like I think there's messages in the app, Insight Timer app, and there's messages on like Instagram and things as well. There's a chant practice in 13 minutes that we're going to do. Like not the message of not two philosophy is not practice. In Advaita, in Advaita Vedanta, the Hindu non-dualism, there's an element of practice for sure. But in the Chan path, there's not so much, I feel. But I do enjoy practice, and I think it's very useful as something to prepare for self-inquiry. And the ones I find most useful are settling inside the body downward, which comes from the embodiment stuff that I've studied in the past, but also from this text called Yasinkana by Zen Master Hakuin. There's a thing called soft butter method, which settles you down and inward, so that when you're inquiring into that I, or sitting at that I, it's not outside the body. It gets very confusing because, like Sandy said, there's tension and fragmentations and stuff in the body and mind system. And that causes us to inquire outside of ourselves, which gets very confusing, scary in a way. So this settles downward, because most people live up really high and forward. So this settles downward and inward in the body. That, through relaxation, settling downward and inward, and listening and chanting, because they unify the internal space of the body, and they settle the thinking mind down so that I can be inquired into. If the mind is really busy, like if you're new to recovery or something, trying to inquire into sense of individuality or I is that's kind of a rough go. The system needs to be settled. So I found in the past that chanting and listening are the most effective, because they just chill the mind, but they also unify the body, so that when you're inquiring, you inquire inside the body. And so we'll do that in 10 minutes. Plus music touches what words can't touch. Words can get very confusing. But music, there's a simplicity to listening and relaxing inside the body. And I feel that's very useful as a preparation for inquiry. And you can also inquire into who is hearing and all these things. Yeah, so if there's any questions or something, please write in the chat. If this type of talk is beneficial to you, let me know, because I'll do a bunch more of them. I'm happy to do more. If it's not beneficial, then hey, non-duality is like a pair of shoes. If they fit, you put them on. If they don't fit, then try something else. Yeah. Go ahead. And you can always send me a message on Insight. Let me know if this stuff's useful, if you have questions. Yes, please do more of this. All right. I'll do more this week, Carla. Just for you, though. Private one-on-ones. I want to read, if I do more, I'm going to get into the big book of recovery too, yeah? Because that path is not so far away from not to philosophy and the message of non-duality. I'll just share one thing before we go. The message of not to and addiction recovery are not to help. They're not looking at the self, as small as self, like this body. This body gets affected one way or another, yeah, oftentimes by these messages. But I haven't read the course in a while, Sandy, but the book's too big. I can't, it's like 900 pages or something. But the lessons are cool, especially like the first 30 lessons or something are cool. They're not ways, in a way. The 12-step program is moving faith from the sense of individuality into a higher power. So traditionally God, but nowadays it can be any higher power really to start. Yeah. The message of not to or non-duality is to see, to inquire into what all of this is arising to. Now the individual, the sense of me, Jay, gets affected a lot by that in my experience. The whole system gets turned down, essentially. And that's quite a pleasurable movement. But it's not through changing the individuality. It's by looking at who it arises to in non-duality. Yeah? It's by seeing that what is presented as two-ness gets negated. And the other side of it, as far as recovery, is losing faith, essentially, in the mental system. Because the mental system has proven itself not to be reliable. When you're in addiction recovery, it's just proven itself not to be so reliable. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be in addiction recovery, yeah? This is my experience. So it's by doing those things, by losing faith, and non-duality in a way also is losing faith and just inquiring into who it arises to, because you see that changing this situation can be altered in many ways. You can become a better engineer or a better something. But when it comes to duality, this is a dualistic program. And as a root situation, we can't change that. This body is not going to become a not body. The head is not going to become a not head. And I was trying to do that for a long time, and it wasn't working. It was creating a lot more suffering. So it's just important to see that. It's like Advaita. They say Advaita is to get free from self, not as self. And then self gets in my experience, benefits a lot from that. But it's from that. It's not by trying to morph this thing into a super thing. Yeah. But yeah, Sandy, I haven't touched the course in a while just because it's so long. But yeah, those first 30 lessons are very interesting to me. Yeah. All right.